In the long and restless history of Africa's fight for freedom, some names burn brighter than others, and among them, Kwame Nkrumah stands tall, not only as the man who led Ghana to independence, but also as the teacher, dreamer, and revolutionary who believed that the fate of his small nation was inseparable from the destiny of an entire continent. And so his life becomes more than biography. It becomes the unfolding drama of Africa's rise from the chains of colonialism to the dawn of self-rule, filled with triumph, sacrifice, betrayal, and vision, a story worth telling and remembering for generations. Kwame Nkrumah was born on September 21, 1909, in Nkroful, a small village in the British colony of the Gold Coast, into a modest family where his father worked as a goldsmith and his mother played the central role in nurturing his early life, instilling discipline, resilience, and faith. And though the circumstances of his birth were far removed from power, young Nkrumah carried a spark of destiny, excelling at school, impressing his teachers, and showing signs of leadership that set him apart from his peers. From elementary school, he rose to Akamoto School in Accra, one of the finest institutions in the colony, where he encountered new ideas and new influences, realizing that education under colonial rule was double-edged. It offered opportunity, but also carried the subtle chains of control. And here he began to see knowledge as more than personal advancement. He began to see it as the weapon that could one day liberate his people, a conviction that deepened with every passing year. His hunger for knowledge pushed him beyond the borders of Africa, first to the United States in 1935, where he enrolled at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, a historically Black institution that shaped his worldview in profound ways. For in America, he saw both the brilliance of education and the cruelty of segregation, and he quickly connected the struggles of African Americans with the oppression of his own people back home, realizing that the fight for dignity was universal, not confined by geography. At Lincoln and later at the University of Pennsylvania, Nkrumah studied philosophy, politics, and theology, earning degrees while also working odd jobs to survive, enduring poverty yet refusing to be broken, and at the same time he immersed himself in activism, organizing discussions, joining Pan-African networks, and finding mentorship in figures like Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois, who sharpened his vision of a liberated and united Africa, an Africa that would stand on its own feet against all forms of oppression. By 1945, he had made his way to London, where he helped organize the Fifth Pan-African Congress in Manchester, a historic gathering that brought together leaders like George Padmore and Jomo Kenyatta, a Congress that declared that Africa's independence could no longer be delayed, and here Nkrumah's leadership shone, his voice rising with urgency and clarity, calling for immediate self-determination. And from that moment, he ceased to be just a student of liberation. He became one of its generals. Returning to the Gold Coast in 1947, Nkrumah became General Secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention. But his radical impatience soon clashed with the caution of its elders, for he wanted independence now, not later. And his fiery words in towns and villages resonated with the masses, turning the independence struggle into a true people's movement. And so in 1949, he broke away to form the Convention People's Party, whose slogan, "Self-Government Now," captured the beating heart of a restless nation. The colonial authorities responded with arrests, and in 1950, Nkrumah found himself in prison after launching the Positive Action Campaign. Yet instead of diminishing him, imprisonment transformed him into a martyr-like figure. And when elections came in 1951, his party swept to victory, with Nkrumah himself triumphantly elected even behind bars, forcing the British to release him and acknowledge the undeniable tide of change he had unleashed. Step by step, Ghana marched towards freedom, and on March 6, 1957, the Gold Coast became Ghana, the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence, with Nkrumah as its prime minister and later president. And before the jubilant crowds in Accra, he declared words that would echo forever. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa. As leader, he embarked on bold programs of modernization, building schools, hospitals, industries, and the great Akosombo Dam to power the nation's future, while also working tirelessly to promote Pan-Africanism, hosting conferences, forming alliances, and laying the groundwork for the Organization of African Unity in 1963. For he believed with every fiber of his being that Africa's survival depended on unity, and that only by standing together could the continent resist neocolonial exploitation. But grand visions came with heavy burdens. For his economic projects strained Ghana's finances, opposition at home grew louder, and his increasing centralization of power alienated many who once supported him. While abroad, his socialist leanings and ties to the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War drew suspicion and hostility from the West, creating a web of internal dissent and external pressure that steadily weakened his government. The breaking point came in 1966 when Nkrumah, traveling on a peace mission to Asia, was overthrown in a military coup, believed by many to have been backed by foreign powers, and in one sudden stroke the dreamer was cast into exile, stripped of office but not of conviction. For even in Guinea, where President Sékou Touré welcomed him and declared him honorary co-president, he continued to write, to speak, and to warn Africa against the dangers of neocolonialism. His final years were marked by illness and isolation, yet he remained unyielding in his belief that Africa could and must unite, penning works like Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, a searing critique of Western exploitation disguised as aid, and though his health failed, his voice never wavered until his death in 1972 in Bucharest, Romania, where he had sought medical treatment, leaving behind not just a nation but a continent still wrestling with the vision he had so passionately set before them. Today, Kwame Nkrumah remains both celebrated and contested, hailed as the man who lit the torch of African independence and scorned by some for his authoritarian style. Yet no honest account of Africa's 20th century can ignore him, for he was the embodiment of the continent's aspirations and contradictions. A man who dared to dream of a free and united Africa when such dreams seemed impossible. And though that dream remains unfinished, his legacy continues to inspire new generations. And so, the story of Kwame Nkrumah is not just the story of Ghana. It is the story of Africa's long march to freedom, a story of sacrifice and struggle, of vision and betrayal, of a man who believed in the impossible and gave his life to pursue it. And if you believe that these stories must never be forgotten, then join us, subscribe, and walk with Shadows of Power Africa, where we keep alive the memory of the leaders who dared to shape the destiny of a continent.